Okay, I'll start.
Wanna
Everybody
make
knows
a
me,
start?
Miguel Pratt,
Oh,
Program Coordinator, IT Administrator here at the Institute.
no, you're program coordinator now, remember? Your title's changed.
Yeah, I said Program Coordinator slash IT, slash.
He wears many hats.
Yeah,
Photographer, videographer.
Miguel does everything, as you know.
Yeah.
Jana Stubbs, Personal Banking Representative Administration, Fidelity Bank.
Fidelity, huh?
Esther Johnson, I work in compliance at Scotia Trust.
All right. Important job, compliance.
Yeah.
Keeping everybody on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, but not well liked.
Oh no, it's not very good.
Yeah,
You won't be very popular with your colleagues.
that's right.
You're probably even less popular with the directors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, compliance is a really difficult job. Inspection, compliance, internal audit, and of course our topic of the program, risk management, that's difficult as well. So welcome to the program. See who else have we got?
I'm Monique Kynes, Assistant Manager at Lending Services, Scotiabank.
Right.
And
Oh,
this is my second class with you. I did the CCP last year.
oh, right. Good. So you came back for more.
Yes, I did.
We must have done all right then.
I aspire to be like Esther. I want to go in risk management.
Right, very good. Yeah, well, you'll find the risk management program is quite challenging in parts. There's quite a lot to it. So who else have we got here?
Yes, so generally this is Sasha Skinner, I'm an attorney, and I am doing compliance and I'm doing risk management in hopes to broaden my portfolio.
Right, yes. Well, we get quite a lot of lawyers working in risk management, don't we? Yeah. So it's a good background to come into the topic. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you. Bonnie Annalee. I worked in compliance management and risk management, and I wanted to get this designation, professional designation in risk management.
Very good. Yes.
Yes.
Well, it is an internationally accredited program. Miguel will tell you a bit more about that in a few moments. But it is examined and certified by a chartered banker, the organisation in the UK. They're actually the world's oldest banking institute. So the designation of chartered banker is very important. And we already have some people from Nassau who've become chartered banker. That's right, isn't it, Miguel?
We got 27 people in the Charter Bank MBA program.
The chartered banker MBA, that's very good.
Right.
So there's two routes. You don't necessarily have to follow the chartered banker MBA route. That's for people who are specifically interested in MBA. But what we're doing on this program and what you did on the financial planner program, these programs are accredited towards chartered banker status. So there is a progressive route, for those of you who wish to continue.
Thank you for that information.
Hi, I'm Cindy Young. I'm with Internal Control with Bank of Santander.
Right.
Yeah.
Internal control, another
Yes.
tough job. Has
Yeah.
anybody got an easy job like marketing or something like that?
No, not new.
No.
Well, like Miguel's job's easy, isn't it?
Very.
IT, ooh. IT, and he's got a tougher job now, program coordinator and IT. Yeah, the schedule, he really does his best, to keep the schedule as it is, but obviously, people are people, sometimes people get sick and stuff like that, so you have to try and allow him to make changes, but only when it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, we have one more.
Good morning again.
Huh?
Siobhan Gardner. I'm employed with the Central Bank of the Bahamas in
Oh,
the
right, of course.
DFIU unit.
examination.
Oh, right. All right, now you are from the top dogs, eh? You're the people that everybody definitely doesn't like visiting. Yes, it's quite amusing actually, because I did a program in the small island of Mauritius, which is in the Indian Ocean, just off the coast of Africa. And why I remember that was because the program was about Basel II New Challenges. It's a few years ago. The Central Bank Governor opened the program just as Wendy Craig has opened some of our programs. And the Central Bank Governor, he opened the program, and he had 6 people from the Central Bank Examination Department. But the really, really funny thing was these ladies were very beautiful ladies. So the men from the other banks were immediately getting their diaries out to try and arrange a visit to their bank. So you see, you're not always unpopular.
Okay.
You can be popular sometimes. Yeah, but a very important job for a central bank. Very difficult job nowadays because, as you know, in Nassau we've got the transition, from Basel II towards Basel III. And I mean, Basel II was extremely complicated. What we see is quite a lot of slides. Some of them are more pertinent to a number of you. Some of them are more important to people from the central bank, but I'll explain that as we go through. Basel III is a long time scale, and again, we have a chart for you on that, and you can see, the implementation running right through to 2018. So it's a long time scale. And the thing to remember about Basel III, and I'm digressing slightly straight away, but Basel III is quite difficult to understand unless you understand Basel II.
Right.
So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be looking at some of the areas in Basel II, some of the key features, and then we'll progress into Basel III, which is coming in at different speeds, depending on the global perspective. Actually, I always feel very pleased with Nassau because you're always, well ahead. And I know a lot of people in Bahamas might think you're behind, but you're not actually. We did the first enterprise-wide risk management program in Nassau in 2004, and we did the first Basel II program in 2005, and Basel II only came out, in 2004, so it's good. And Wendy Craig's always been, a strong supporter of implementing changes and the central bank trying to bring in, good frameworks to help the people within Bahamas. Okay, so the program, I think Miguel will talk a little bit about the program, but you can see from the schedule the 6 modules. Don't worry that the modules look out of sequence, because all of the modules are actually, standalone in themselves. Although as we progress towards the end, you'll see a degree of integration coming in. And the first module that I'll be starting with you, enterprise risk management, well, that sets, more of a macro picture of some of the things that you face in the different modules. So when we talk about enterprise-wide risk management, we're talking about the full issues. And then some of the other modules, such as Charlene Small and David Slatter, they'll be getting much more specific on certain areas, such as investment, risks, and corporate governance and things like that, which I know are very important in any jurisdiction. And then what will happen towards the end is Miguel will set up some mock exams for you, and I think he'll tell you a bit about that now.
Yeah, I'll send you a link that will allow you to do some practice mock exam questions. As soon as we cover a few of the modules, get you practicing how it's laid out.
Now the good thing about the exam is you can practice it, and when you do the mock exam, you can do it from your home on the computer, or you can do it from your office when you're practicing, so it's not under strict exam conditions. But actually, when you do the final exam, you know, Miguel will arrange for you to come in, probably into the institute there. The other good news is it is an open book exam, which some people find helpful and some actually don't, because some people, you know, find there's a temptation to refer too much to the notes and the binders, and you'll see by the time you get all those 6 modules into your binder, you can have a massive amount of materials. So my advice to you would be, when you do the mock exam and when you do the final exam, you know, go through it, try and answer what you can immediately, you know, and then go back through the questions that you weren't so sure about, have another try, and then maybe at that point you could refer to your notes. But I certainly wouldn't try and answer each question from your notes, because you'll find a lot of questions you can answer, you know, from the knowledge that you've built up during the study period. So you'll see on the schedule the total study hours are recommended around 200, which I know sounds a lot, but if you divide that up, you know, over the 9 months, and then you divide that up over weeks, try and save yourself a study plan. That's what we'd recommend. You know, try and do some type of personal study plan. Try and give yourself a chance to be, you know, to do some work each week, and then you'll find it's an easier process. There will be some case studies as well for practice. It will help you. The exams are multiple choice on the Miguel.
Yeah, it's a 2-hour exam, it's 70 questions, multiple choice. And it's done on the computer, so you get your results right away. 70 questions, 2 hours.
So on this program, Miguel, the risk manager, there's no written assessment, is there?
No, there's no written assessment for this one.
So it's not all multiple choice.
And fourth, I suggest to bring a calculator for your, and especially for modules 3 and for the liquidity, module 3 and module 4. So you'll be doing some math in that, quite a bit of math.
Just a basic calculator?
Yeah.
Well, a programmable calculator.
Yeah, either a scientific or we call it a business one. No, another one with, you know, just a
Right.
simple one, not a simple one.
So when you
I
meet
think that's one of
Charlie
the
and
functions.
Scott, they'll give you advice on the type of calculator. Okay, so a bit more advice then. Since there's no written essay, you know what I said about going through, trying to answer the questions, then go through again, referring to your notes, and then of course at the end don't leave any blanks, because you've got a 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 chance, haven't you, of getting the answer. So if you've got a few blanks left, just take a chance. Okay, so we should make a start then.
I have
Okay, so what
one
we're
question.
done. Yes, you have a
Is
question?
it a 9-month course or is it 5 months?
Well, there's 6 modules, and each module should be spaced over a month there. Yes?
Okay.
Yeah, it's between 6 and 7 months. It depends, you know, it depends
Okay.
if the schedule doesn't change.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Okay.
But
And,
we
and
should.
then when do you set the exam again?
We want to set the exam. Most of you will be going. How's your vacation? August, folks. August. We probably could set the exam. Give them a month off and set the exam for first week in September. All right. I mean, I'll leave it up to you all. It's flexible.
See how you progress through the year.
Yeah, you know.
So
If someone take it earlier, that's fine. You can take it earlier.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
See how much you feel you need by way of revision time after the final module.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So today we want to start off with the enterprise risk management concept, and then what you'll find as we develop this, we will move into one of the case studies, which is Bearings Bank. That's just because it would be terribly boring if I just sat here talking to you all the time. So we'll have a look at a real life case study. Most of the case studies in the program are from real life situations, and they're quite good to use because that helps you in your job, because you're obviously faced with real situations and not academic ones. And then also we'll move into some of the aspects of Basel III. So I hope within your folders there, everybody's got a copy of where we're starting with the enterprise risk management. Yes?
Yes.
And has everybody got a copy of Basel III, or is Miguel still working on that for some of you?
Still working on it.
Still working on it, okay.
Wait 1 second. I don't have it. Okay.
Okay, so if everybody's got the enterprise risk management, that's a good place to start this morning. So the thing is, when you talk about risk management and enterprise risk management, one of the reasons it's so difficult is because I like to describe it as a galaxy of risks, because there's so many risks, and then the lady at the front who's a lawyer will know that within the legal profession, when we're looking at all of these risks and trying to establish what the risks are and quantify the extent of the impact of the risk, and then we're trying to look for ways of mitigating the risk. But of course, the most dangerous risks are the ones that we don't foresee, yes? And that happens in our personal lives as well, doesn't it? We make certain plans, and then something unexpected happens. On a program like this, most of it's face-to-face, some of it is via the internet, and of course the risk we face, is there's a power cut or something goes wrong with the signal. So there'll always be these type of risks. Now we work quite a bit with Chinese executives in London, because the Chinese come to London quite a bit because they quite like coming to the UK for some of their education. We like them to come, of course, because the Chinese have got plenty of money, haven't they? Yeah. Thanks to the Americans, if everything the American is buying, 70 to 80% of all goods in America come from China, don't they?
Yes.
And I shouldn't be saying too much about that, because my phone here, designed in California by Apple. Where is it assembled? In China, of course. And then Miguel, we joke about Miguel because he likes to shop at Marks and Spencer's, and he very proudly showed me one of the ties he bought last time he was there. And of course, he was a bit devastated when he paid quite a lot of money for it, and then when he looked at the back of the tie, again you can guess where it was made. Well, it was bought in Marks and Spencer's, and it was actually made in China, so you probably could have got it from your straw market a lot cheaper. Yeah. So there we are. And they come to us. Anyway, the purpose of me telling you this is because one of the visiting groups of executives who are quite senior people, we're obviously doing our best in London to try and make everything good for them, where they're going to be staying, the program, the various speakers we had, etc., etc. And it was my job to actually host the welcome dinner on the first evening, yes? So I thought, well, knowing quite a bit about these executives, and of course the Chinese food that we have enjoyed in Bahamas and in the UK, that the taste that we have, it's Cantonese style, isn't it? It's from Hong Kong region, so it's South China, it's Cantonese style. But of course, when you get these senior executives coming, a lot of them are coming from Beijing, which is the capital of China. And Beijing cooking is very, very different. So I thought, well, my first risk here is, trying to risk manage this program, is I want to not give them, typical Chinese in London restaurant food. We'll have to try and get a Beijing style restaurant. Anyway, one of my colleagues knew quite well a restaurant called the Summer Palace, so we thought we'd take them there. So that would mitigate the risk there. And then of course a lot of the middle-aged to the older Chinese people, they don't speak any English at all. It's mainly the younger people who speak some English, the rest don't speak any English. So we had interpreters, and we had 2 lady interpreters that we've used before. So, we're reducing our risk position there by using good interpreters, going to a restaurant that we thought would be fine, and all these plans, were in place, and the program was due to start on the Monday. So feeling reasonably happy about the whole thing. But the risk I overlooked was one you've probably never heard of. And that, unless you've been to one of the seminars I did at the Hilton Hotel, where we had quite a lot of Bahamians there, and that's called Gambay. Anybody heard of Gambay? No? So here's a word for you, Chinese word, Gambay. Gambay. Now what Gambay means in Chinese is cheers, okay? But it's not like cheers when we do it in Nassau, where you can take a little drink. Gambay means bottoms up, okay? So you have to drink the full, so whatever you have in your glass, you have to drink the full glass. Now I had no idea about all this, so we're hosting the dinner, and there were, several round tables, just like the banquets you have in Nassau, Hilton Hotel or whatever. And because I was like hosting it, on the top table was the president of these visiting executives. And in China, the protocol is very, very important. So all the top people like sit together, and then you have second table and third table and so on. So they're very protocol orientated. Even when you give them your business card, you don't just kind of pick up your card and, I don't know if you can see this, but you don't just give them the card like that. You have to hold it like this, with your thumb and your forefinger, and you present it like that, you see? And they take the card from you that way, and that's the protocol. And then of course you don't just stick it in your pocket, you have to put it down carefully on the table or the desk. So here we are on this top table. And then before we started to eat, Chinese love red wine. Now, I know you like red wine in Nassau as well. Miguel and I, we prefer your local beer, but there we are. It's another story. So all the bottles of red wine arrive on the top table, and this is before we start eating. So the president, he has the red wine for everybody on the top table, and then suddenly everybody stands up, and they all shout Gambay. So all of these glasses of red wine go down on the top table. But that wasn't the end of it, because what happens next is the president and some of the people from the top table, they have to visit the other tables. So you might imagine this is before we start eating, yes? So this is what I'm saying about the unidentified risk, was this Gambay risk. So we have to visit all these various tables and then come back to the top table. So there was a quick lesson in Chinese and in risk management. I can see you struggling with a chord there. Are we still?
It's
Yeah, our battery is
running
low.
low. There we go.
You better shout for Miguel.
Me-
He told you that's his job, IT administrator.
It's okay.
Program coordinator. It's back now?
Yes.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Sorry, man, I was putting the PC out of case study. Sorry, what happened? Oh.
We got it.
We have
Okay.
backup IT.
Okay, so we had a technology risk there that Miguel was not expecting. So there's another example. So when you're thinking of enterprise risk management, whether it's from the central bank or as a compliance officer or as someone working within risk management in a financial institution, the idea is we're trying to look at all the risks that we can foresee. So on the second slide, what I tried to start with was put in, you'll see the board of directors right in the middle there. Now those of you working in compliance and in central bank will know that this topic is very, very difficult. Risk management is a difficult topic, and of course it's even more difficult if the tone for all of this is not set by the people at the top, yeah? So that's why I have it right in the centre. So what's the board of directors? What's their risk policies? And what about corporate governance issues? You know, you'll be having a module on that a bit later on. I think it's Glenn, it's either Glenn Nottage or Tyrone Fitzgerald takes the governance module. So it must be set from the centre. It's no use, no matter how clever a compliance officer you are, you know, you can't drive the organisation from your position working upwards, can you? You know, these policies have got to be set by the board of directors, and we'll see that as we discuss some of the various risk management manuals that should be in place. Each and every one of those should have a preface, maybe only 1 or 2 or 3 pages, setting the tone, you know, by the directors. So what are the board risk policies and governance issues? And it's from that central point that we can then move to the top left is the part that I would recommend. Not the top right, but looking at the top left first of all. So what we're trying to do is...
It's charging.
Have you got that? You need it back to you?
Yeah. Miguel. Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Hello, we're trying again. I think you...
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, that was in the wrong, I didn't put it in the right hole. Right side.
I'm trying to share the screen again, Miguel. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Alright.
So we got the power cable in place now?
Yeah, we're good to go. More operational risk.
So you're doing a better job as coordinator than IT manager so far this morning. We're only 25 minutes in. Okay, so where were we? Yes, we talked about the board risk policies and governance. Yeah, being very, very important, you know, setting the tone from the top, some people would call it. And then, if we head top left, I think that's where you lost me, yes?
Yes.
So we go top left. We don't go top right. It's tempting to go top right because people enjoy writing strategies, don't they? Yeah, you know, particularly people at director level, or they'll write a strategy, blah blah blah. But as you know, the strategies have to be based on things that are firm within the organisation. Otherwise, the strategic plan won't work out. So my recommendation is we start top left, and we look at the organisation specifically because different organisations will face different risks, won't they? So what you're trying to do is identify the risks within the organisation that you are working. For the central bank, it's much more difficult for you because each and every one that you visit will have different types of risks, which is why central bankers' job is difficult. So that top left, can we identify the risks? And that's difficult to do. And then the next part is even more difficult, is to try and measure the risks. Because some of these risks won't have a big impact on the organisation, but some of them could have. Some of them could be absolutely catastrophic. As we'll see, for example, when we look at the Barings Bank case study, we'll see that one young man, aged 27, he became world famous or world infamous, Nick Leeson, aged 27, he broke the bank. Yeah, and the bank was over 200 years old, merchant bank out of London. This young man broke it single-handed, as we'll see. So there'll be lessons to learn there. So can we measure the risk? Can we then, having measured it, quantify the impact? So what will the impact be? The impact may be quite small. For example, if it's a teller and they're taking some money out of the till, well, the impact of that's relatively small. But there could be other risks, such as reputational risk, and I'll show you a case of that that's just recently happened in the UK. You might have read about it. The lady there mentioning Brighton in the south. Well, the news just broke recently about the chairman of the Cooperative Bank. Have you heard about him? Reverend Flowers, been a church minister for over 20 years, chairman of the Cooperative Bank, fourth largest retail bank in the UK. He's been found that he had a serious drug habit for years and years and years, and also he has a liking for young men, right? Not young women. Yeah? This is the chairman of the bank, and he was recently interviewed by the parliamentary inquiry, and he didn't even know the total assets in his balance sheet. So that's a right mess, so we'll come on to that shortly. But obviously reputational risk can have a serious impact on the organisation. It can take years and years and years to build up your reputation, such as Scotiabank there in Nassau. You've been there a long, long time within the Caribbean. But of course these things can be damaged very, very quickly. So measuring the risk, quantifying what we think the impact will be, and I'll help you with this. I'll show you an example of what I would call a risk register, and of course the Central Bank will help you as well, because they've been developing frameworks over the last 3-4 years to help the organisations with risk measurement. And then, is it possible to shift any of these risks or mitigate them in certain ways? Some of the risks we might be able to mitigate with some type of insurance. Then when we've done that, then it's a good time to start setting our strategies for risk management, yes? So we can't really write all the strategies without having done this, very thorough risk review. So then we can develop a strategic plan, then we can set key objectives for our risk management, and then we start coming to the difficult parts, which are things like the implementation plan and are there any corporate governance issues. The next step will be the management, and this is where it gets more difficult still, because we've got to manage these risk management processes. We'll need people to lead the processes. We need to quantify what sort of output we're looking for. Do we need any innovative technology to help us? And then of course there's the big area there of people's skills, because people's skills in risk management aren't maybe quite as good as we would hope for. That's because it's a complicated job. People will need training. And then I mentioned the risk register. Can we build up some type of database within the organisation of what you could call risk events, yes? So building up a database, people say, well, yes, we've got the files, but generally the files are in various locations. If we can build up a risk register or a risk database, that will help us to see what type of risks that we frequently seem to encounter, and the impact of those risks. We'll come back to the risk register a bit later. Now the final part of our wheel of action there is the financial part. Now this is a difficult part, and you'll know working in compliance or in risk management that this is where we run into problems straight away, because these things cost money, don't they? So generally, if you're looking at the cash flow impact to begin with will be negative, and therefore the effect on the capital base will be possibly as a drain of capital. But we've got to plan longer term. We're not in this short term. Longer term, the idea is it should improve and strengthen our cash flows as time goes by. Why? Because we won't get these unexpected risks. We won't get these unexpected events that can deteriorate our cash flows in our capital bases. So what we're also trying to do, and we'll look at this going forward in this module and in the investment liquidity module, we'll be looking at certain new type of measurements, which we call value-based measurements. So at risk, yes, we will use the traditional measurements, such as what return we're getting on equity, what return on capital, what's our profits relative to income, etc., etc. But we'll also build in some value-based measurements, because some of the things we'll be doing to improve risk management won't necessarily have an immediate mathematical effect, yeah? So we need certain types of new measurements coming in. Okay, so what's lying behind all of this? Well, currently, and I'm sure you'd all agree, we have globally now a very unforgiving stock market. And the stock markets respond quite dramatically to some of these bad risk management things that are happening. And in the UK, we've had the Royal Bank of Scotland moving into serious trouble. We've had Northern Rock, which we'll look at a little bit later on. Northern Rock was the first bank in the UK to have what we would call a banking run. So this is where people were queuing in the streets, waiting to get the money back. We've not seen that in the UK for over 100 years. So the stock market is very unforgiving. And then, as well as I, there are so many new regulations coming in. And in Nassau you're facing taxation as well, aren't you, coming in? And then we've got Basel II, Basel III, we've got new accounting requirements. The good news with accounting is gradually the world is moving towards international accounting standards, IAS or IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, with the exception, of course, of the people who are much nearer to you than to us. And that's our friends in the US, yes? They want to stick with US GAAP accounting, generally accepted accounting principles. Then we've seen industry debacles such as Enron, Enron, the world's largest banking collapse. So there is currently a worldwide focus on good corporate governance practices and the establishment of enterprise risk management. And if you want to make a note on that slide just there, under Basel III, you will see the Basel Committee are calling it firm-wide risk management, FIRM, firm-wide risk management. We're referring to it as enterprise risk management under the CRO, Chief Risk Officer, yes? Not under the compliance officer. The Chief Risk Officer should be, quite a senior level role within the organisation, and they're trying to coordinate the various risks, as we'll see in a few moments. What we're also seeing globally is convergence of financial organisations, insurance organisations, and security markets. So what we've got is a coordination, as you will see, of regulation. In the UK, the large insurance companies are coming under the central banking structure. Securities markets, they come under IOSCO, if you want to make a note of that, IOSCO. You can take a look at their website if you just do a Google search on IOSCO, IOSCO. You'll see that's the organisation that regulates securities markets. Basel, of course, is the banking and the financial side, and then the insurance side, they have their own regulators, but again, it's all coming under one general coordinated thrust. So where do we start? Here we go. So here's a typical ERM process with the Chief Risk Officer there, and you see I've positioned this person alongside, not replacing, but alongside the Chief Financial Officer. Now we have suggested this since 2004. We're now 10 years on, and it was our belief at that time that's the sort of seniority level that this person should have. Should be alongside the same sort of status as the Chief Financial Officer. There shouldn't be, tiers down below. So what sort of things will the Chief Risk Officer be looking at? Well, here is some categorization of the risks. So if you didn't know where to start within the organisation, you could say, well, let's take a look at what credit risks we're facing. Let's take a look at the market risks. Let's take a look at what I would call business risks. And if you're not sure how to do this, you'll see I put 8 in brackets there. That refers to the Basel II documentation, and I'll give you the reference on that in a few moments. But you'll see the Basel Committee many years ago, to try and assist people with risk management, they suggested splitting financial organizations into 8 different business lines. And I know that has been utilized by many central banks, because it's quite difficult, when you've got a lot of risks across a lot of different units, how you should split it up. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later, looking at these 8 business lines. And then, of course, we've got a very important area of operational risk, and we get feedback on this from internal audit, the external auditors, possibly the people in IT, and then also I put in brackets there insurance, because there's quite a lot of operational risks would be mitigated by taking out insurance. So, if we start this process, people will challenge you as risk managers, and they'll say, well, okay, you're going to be spending money on this, spending money on systems, etc., etc. What are the benefits of enterprise risk management? Well, the starting point is it should actually improve the organization's return on equity. Why would it do that? Well, it should improve return on equity because we shouldn't see, these unexpected losses and events, because we're managing our risks much more tightly. And in turn, this should improve the shareholder value, particularly the larger institutions. Why? Because many of these institutions are quoted on the stock market, and you know as well as I do, the share prices on the stock market, they move up and down, don't they? So share price is not a firm figure. The share price is a perception, and part of that perception will be based on the business performance, and part of that performance will obviously be linked to the risk management. So another benefit of ERM is it should broaden risk awareness within the organisation. It should help us try and align the risk profile of the organisation with the strategy. Now this is where we've seen some dreadful examples in the UK of misaligned strategy relative to risk. And there's a very good example in the Caribbean quite recently. You know, people talk of risk versus return, yes? You know, you'll have studied that. Accountants talk about it. Can you get a high return without high risk? Or is risk directly correlated to return? What do you think? If you got a low return, would you expect it was low risk?
Yes.
Yes. So if you get a high return, would you expect high risk?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a basic, common sense starting point, and that's where you ladies are very good at. Men generally aren't so good at that. We would like to get a high return with low risk, but generally it's impossible. Now, a good example in the Caribbean recently, which you probably have read about. Have you heard of Stanford, Stanford? Stanford Investment Bank? Do you know where that was located? No? In Antigua, small island in the Caribbean, quite close to Barbados. Stanford Investment Bank. Mr. Stanford told his 20,000 investors that he could provide high returns and low risk, and people believed it. Unfortunately, the whole thing was a fraud. He's now being sentenced to jail in the US, and he'll spend 110 years in jail. He's currently over 60, so he's going to be pretty old when he gets out. People are joking he'll probably get out about the same time as Mr. Madoff, I'm sure you would have heard of, running his Ponzi scheme out of New York. Yeah? This was similar, except the difference with Madoff was he persuaded very rich people to invest in his scheme, but it was the same scheme. He would outperform the marketplace, and he would pay a high return on a low risk investment strategy. Stanford was the same, except it was people at a much lower income level, and unfortunately a lot of people have lost their savings. How the scheme works is the lady at the front there on my left. I persuade you to invest, say $1,000 with me, and I would pay you, say, 15%. But the marketplace, the market returns I could get would be maybe only 6, 7, 8%. So how can I pay you more? Well, the reason I can pay you more is the lady in the green next to you. She hears, that I'm paying big returns, so she's a new investor to me. So what I do is I pay out my first lady part of the second lady's investment, and of course she's waiting for her high return, but meanwhile the lady in the blue on the left hand side there, she's a new investor, and that's how it works. So the only reason it works is that new investors keep coming in. This is known as a Ponzi scheme, Ponzi. Some people call it the pyramid scheme. And it'll keep working until there's an event which dries up the investment. In Madoff's case in New York, it was the global crash. When we had the global crash and the markets froze, there were no new investors, and that's what became his problem. Stanford had the same problem. There were no new savers coming in. Stanford had style, just like living on Paradise Island. You had his private yacht, his private helicopter, etc., etc. He was listed in the US Forbes magazine as one of the richest men in the US, but actually he didn't have any money at all. The only money he had, was people investing in his bank. So there we are. So risk profile with strategy, very, very important. So your job, if your directors are setting, a very aggressive strategy for growth, what do you think it's going to be like managing the risk? Is it going to be easy or difficult? Well, it's going to be more difficult than if the directors were of a very conservative nature, yes? If the directors take a very conservative strategy, then the risks that they're taking should not be as great because they're managing the business conservatively. Anybody know the major risk a conservative business would face going forward? What do you think? Any ideas? I can't quite hear you. Somebody in the back speaking? Any
No.
ideas?
No.
Well, they could become obsolete, couldn't they? Yeah? If a business is run in a very, very conservative way, as time goes by, they might become like the dinosaurs, yeah? They would become extinct, yeah? So the major danger a conservative business faces is it could become out of date, yeah? The products, the services could become so old-fashioned that people simply don't want them anymore. We've seen that to a degree in the UK with some of our very old, traditional, heavy engineering businesses where they've been replaced, by high-tech products and substitutes. So risk profiling strategy, very, very important. So another benefit of enterprise risk management would be to try and minimize surprises and losses. Also, it should help us rationalize our capital requirements, because if we can do a risk assessment of the new strategies, the new investments, it would help us. And then the final point is when the lady comes from the central bank, it'll help us because it should help assure regulatory compliance. Yeah? So our risk profile is matching what the central bank would be expecting of us. So, in terms of a control function, what we're looking for then is an integrated approach to risk management, where we're trying to involve the people in audit, people in the legal section, people in compliance, the finance unit, any insurance unit, and then the people who are working and taking collateral or securitization. Then what we would need is some type of committee within the organization who will review these risk strategies, and then we should end up with an integrated risk reporting system. Now, when we're thinking of integrating the business to try and do all of this, there will be certain things that would cross our paths that make it very difficult. When a new product comes in, it can be pushed very hard by the relationship managers within the organization, so it's difficult to get them to stop for a second and say, well, let's take a look, what's the risks with these new products? Because of course what they're thinking of primarily is enhancing their relationship management with their clients. So new products can be a dangerous area. New product business development. We're going to move out of Nassau with some of these new products, and we're going to take them into, for example, Miami. Would that be risky? Why? Why is it risky? Yeah, it's a new jurisdiction. It's difficult enough in Nassau, but American rules and regulations are actually very, very fierce, very difficult. So it wouldn't be a terribly good idea unless you know exactly what you're going to be facing. I'd much rather you came to London. That's speaking from a biased point of view. What about mergers and acquisitions? Risky area? Oh yes, extremely risky. Most of the mergers and acquisitions that we've seen in the UK within the last 10 to 15 years most of them have gone wrong. Why have they gone wrong? When they had best investment banking advice, etc., etc., etc. Well, just because of the usual reasons. You know, when two organizations come together, there can be a clash of culture, yes? There can be a clash of technology. Good example for you in Caribbean would be that first Caribbean International Bank, yes? Where you had Canadian-based technology trying to merge a platform with a British-based technology out of Barbados, yes? So you've got, you know, the English culture of the Barclays side, and then you have the Canadian culture. So two different cultures coming together, and is the technological platform scalable? And then the problem with these really, really big organizations is, can they be managed? And of course that's led to the recent expression in the US and in the UK, too big to fail. But that's rubbish, isn't it? You know, you can't be too big to fail. All that means is your failure is going to be more dramatic. And that again is what we're seeing in the UK. In the UK at the moment, I am a shareholder, not because I wanted to be, but because the British government made a bailout through the Bank of England into the Royal Bank of Scotland. So we currently own 80% of the Royal Bank of Scotland shares. Royal Bank of Scotland was a huge merger with the National Westminster Bank, and also they tried to acquire a Dutch bank, ABN AMRO. So that's an example. Lloyds used to be there in Nassau, didn't they? Lloyds was very successful commercial bank. They merged with the Trustee Savings Bank. I asked myself the question, why would a commercial bank want to merge with a savings bank? You know, strategically it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, does it? Anyway, time went by, and then because of the size of their organization, they bought another bank called HBOS, which you might have heard of, HBOS. HBOS was a merger in itself of the Halifax Building Society, which was UK domiciled in Yorkshire, and they merged with a Scottish bank, this time not the Royal Bank of Scotland, but the Bank of Scotland. So here you've got Lloyds Bank, who merged with the Savings Bank, then they're merging with HBOS, which is a building society, in a Scottish bank. Anyway, the rest is history. We currently own over 50% of their shares as well. So there's two examples of M&As and why, if your organization is thinking of this, you know, it's an area that we need to look at very closely as risk managers. Compensation strategy, why would that be a difficult area for risk? Well, it's because, you know, the big bonus culture we've seen in the US and in the UK, and I'll give you an example of that shortly within Barclays Bank. And then finally on this integration part is the allocation of resources, and this will be a consistent battle for you working in risk management. Okay, one more framework, and then we'll just take a 5-minute very short break while I make a quick cup of tea, and we'll start looking at a case study just to break this up. So here we are in terms of integrating these businesses. So here's the first template we could look at. We could separate this into organizational units, and I'll give you the list of 8 units a little bit later on. And then we try and segregate the risks across the top there: credit risk, market risk, operational risk, and other risks, to come up with a total risk profiling. Can you see the words on the slide? RAROC, R-A-R-O-C. This is a new methodology, and this stands for the Risk Adjusted Return on Capital. RAROC, Risk Adjusted Return on Capital, which some of the very large financial institutions are using. So this is where you would look at the return that you're making on capital in the organisation, but then you would make an adjustment for the risks that that unit is taking. We will have examples on this as our programme develops. Now the other word, if you want to make a note on the same slide, is RORAC, R-O-R-A-C. So you've got RAROC on the slide. The other one is R-O-R-A-C. It's the same thing. It's the return on the risk-adjusted capital. So two modern methods of terminology where we're looking at risks and how they impact on the return on capital. Now a good example of this would be in a commercial bank where, you know, on the various loans made in the bank, there's a return made on each loan, isn't there? You know, by way of the interest margin and by way of the commission charge. But that return is not sensitized for the risk on that loan, yes? So this is the methodology. It's looking at the risks the credit department are taking, for example, the market risks they're taking with their products and trying to make a risk adjustment. Complicated, and we'll come back on that. Okay, let's just take a very short break. And is Miguel bringing you any refreshments this morning? Nothing so far? Maybe it's a bit later. Okay, well, we'll just take a 5-minute break to stretch your legs, and then we'll take a look at the Barings Bank case study, where you'll see, using this template, the case doesn't just fall neatly, you know, into market risk or neatly into operational risk. And this is one of the things you'll face as risk managers, you know, that these things aren't as clear-cut as that. You know, they can include several risks. I'll just switch my mic off just a few minutes.
You okay? Everything okay? Oh! Yeah, well, my kids. They come soon, they come soon.
Okay, so how's the sound been so far? It's been pretty clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, okay. Okay. So let's take a look at this Barron's Bank case. So has everybody got print of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so just take 5 minutes to read it through. And what I want you to do is, as you read it through, highlight things that catch your eye, you know, as a risk manager, yeah? Now some of the technical terms, you might not understand the technical terms, but that's, you know, something that we face frequently as risk managers, you know, where people are doing complex things and we're not too sure what they're actually doing, which makes part of the job very difficult. And I know the job of the central banker is very difficult, you know, when you're visiting all these different organisations, you know, undertaking different activities. So read through it and highlight things that catch your eye, and then we'll have a group discussion on it in about 5 minutes or so, okay? So what we're looking for is, what lessons can we learn from this case?
steady, here go.
Has everybody read it through, or are you still reading? Done? Okay then, so, this is based on a real case, and you'll see the disastrous result in the end, where the bank, the 200 years old bank, how much was it bought for? £1, yeah. $1.60 at the moment, yeah? 200-year-old bank. Why would they only pay £1?
They've taken a lot of liabilities.
Yeah, a lot of, what type of liabilities? I'm looking for one more word. No, a lot of
Financial?
known liabilities or unknown?
No.
Unknown, yeah? Yeah. So when you buy a business, you're buying the assets, which generally, we'd have confirmed with due diligence, wouldn't we, whether the assets are of the value that's stated. Some assets can be overvalued, some undervalued, but at the same time, you're taking on board the liabilities, and the problem in this case, of course, is we don't know the full extent of the liabilities, do we? Everybody see that? So this case is a risk manager's nightmare, yeah? Because we don't really know the extent of the liabilities. So can anyone see what we would call in the UK warning signals and what the Americans would call red flags? Anybody see a red flag in this?
Newsom got control of the trading and back office, so it was like he was running the whole show by himself.
Very good, very good. So he's a basic control, isn't it? So generally what you'll find is even although these situations might occur and involve very complex products or complex activities, what you often find actually, particularly with the bigger events, is when you really get down to it, generally it's some fairly basic things, that lie beneath it. And of course this is where, the lady at the front who's a lawyer, this is where she'll, have this type of experience, that these complexities generally, there are straightforward things underlying it. And of course that's one of the basic things, isn't it? And we would call it no segregation of duties, yes?
Right.
Yeah? So it's a basic thing you'd be looking for. How can this man, even if he is general manager, how can he be in charge of the front office and the back office? It's a nonsense, isn't it? So who's checking his work? Who checks Nick Leeson's work? Do you think the directors in London are checking it?
No.
Well, no, because they're even further away than I am from Nassau. You know, it takes about 11 hours to fly to Singapore from the UK. It could take about 8.5 to get to Nassau, depending which way the wind's blowing. The directors in London, are they checking on these activities?
No.
No. What comes through in terms of corporate governance? Do you think there's a tight corporate governance structure here or not?
No.
No, there's not, is there? So here these guys in London, they don't seem to have any idea what Nick Leeson's doing in Singapore. So why are they so relaxed about it, do you think?
He's making money.
Because
They didn't understand
that's one thing, because they don't understand what's going on. But what's the other, even more important thing?
He was making money.
Yeah, exactly. He's reporting big profits. So the division in Singapore is making big profits. Those profits are then reported into head office in London, yes? The directors get very good salaries, don't they? And also, what else do they get usually? A bonus based on performance. So they're pretty relaxed about the whole thing. So this situation is quite bizarre. You've got a man who's in charge of the front office and he's actually checking his own work every day. So you can imagine, oh, Nick, what sort of day did you have today? Oh, I had a good day, I made $1 million. Oh, well done. Tick. Tick on the sheet. It's just crazy, isn't it? You know, it's a crazy situation. Okay, now there's something else. There's something else that you might think is a warning flag, a red flag, or a warning signal. What was something that you would probably look at as compliance, or as a risk manager, or as a central bank, if you were visiting in Singapore? What is something that stands out in this case?
To me, the profits and the position.
Yeah, the profit and the position does, definitely, yes. But there's something else that stands out within the overview section on the first page.
Different types of contracts and different mismatch amounts.
Yes, but where do they go?
To the errors account.
To this account that he created.
Yeah, look at that account, eh? Error account. 8888. Even the number would make you feel, goodness me, I better have a look at this. Yeah, so you know, when you have these error accounts, we used to call them suspense accounts. Yeah, and the idea is, you know, there might be the occasional entry go through, but you wouldn't have lots and lots of entries going through there, would you?
No.
So that's a warning flag. Whenever you see a suspense account or an error account, you know, it needs investigating. Now, what about James Baker? He was the auditor coming in. Let's have a look at how he got on. So this is on the second page. July to August. James Baker, internal auditor, spends 2 weeks in Singapore investigating the immense profits being made there. Baker identifies weakness of internal controls and recommends the general manager should no longer be responsible for the back office. And what happens to this? In response, a separate finance manager in Hong Kong is given part-time responsibility. So what do you think about that?
There still leaves loopholes because he still doesn't have full-time responsibility over the back
Exactly.
office function. So when he's not there, Leeson still has that window to do nonsense.
Exactly, yeah. And of course, for those of you who know your geography a bit, you know, Hong Kong's thousands of miles from Singapore. It's a long, long way from Singapore. So you've got a man all that geographical distance away, and as you say, he's only given part-time responsibility for watching over the back office. So that's hopeless, isn't it? That's hopeless. Anything else then?
I would think about when you mentioned about the corporate governance and the
Yes.
oversight, I noticed that the senior managers didn't have any knowledge about trading.
Yes?
So I think that would be considered as a warning sign there, because how can they have proper oversight of something that they don't have any
I
knowledge
don't
about it?
understand, exactly. And of course, we've seen this occur not just with this Barings Bank case, but we've seen it occur much more recently with the global crisis,
Right.
where, you know, you all have heard of these CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. I mean, what the hell is a collateralized debt obligation? A CDO. And if you asked an American investment banker from Wall Street, he would explain it to you, but you still probably wouldn't understand it. You know, it's a debt obligation which is securitized. So what you've got, and it sounds attractive, you've got the security of the real estate lying behind the loan, and then you've got the securitization of the cash flows that repay these things. So when these things were bundled together, and some of the investment grades that were attributable to these, it came across what we discussed earlier. Because these CDOs, when we were bundled together, we were told they were low risk, but offered, guess what? A high return.
Right.
So unfortunately in the UK, you know, like many other countries, we swallowed it, you know, with very bad consequences. Basically, these were what you would call low-grade mortgages or property loans, yes? Made in the US. And they were called subprime mortgages. Goodness me. If you just stop for a second and say, well, what does the term subprime actually mean? You know, as a lawyer, subprime means low quality, doesn't it? It means below prime. So here you've got as a bundle of these subprime mortgages, bundled together, securitized, and then we buy them thinking they're good investments. Oh, goodness me. And that's an example again of not understanding something that's complex. So your point about the directors is very, very, very important. And actually in the UK at the moment, we'll come on to this a bit later, but the Financial Services Authority in the UK, which was our central bank regulatory arm, they are currently being disbanded because they haven't been doing a very good regulatory job, and they're being split into two: the Prudential Regulatory Authority and the Financial Conduct Authority. I'll show you a slide on that a little bit later, but basically the FSA are being discontinued, which makes it quite difficult for a number of overseas regulators because they copied the UK model. Yeah? Why was this model set up many years ago? Well, the reason was that our central bank, the Bank of England, the government did not believe they were still being effective as a regulator because of things like Barings Bank, yes? So some of these disasters that went on, the FSA was a new regulatory authority set up by the Deputy Governor from the Bank of England, and of course time has gone by, and the FSA supposedly didn't spot, the Royal Bank of Scotland, they didn't spot the Northern Rock, etc., etc. So their role has been challenged, and guess what? Control now has turned full circle and it's going back onto the Bank of England, where it started from. So these things, these governance issues are very, very important. Anyway, at the moment, to become a director of a financial institution in the UK, at last, you will be interviewed and you must understand financial products, which seems pretty basic common sense, doesn't it? But there's been some terrible examples. You may have read about a large Spanish bank where it collapsed and the Spanish government had to bail it out. And during the inquiry, one of the ladies who was a senior director, they asked her, about the bank's balance sheet, and didn't she spot the deterioration in the bank's permission? You know what she said? She said, well, how would you expect me to understand the bank's balance sheet? I'm a chemist. By profession. She said, I'm a chemist by profession. But the next question should have been, okay then, well, what are you doing earning a salary of 200,000, not dollars, but euros, yeah, which is close to the pound, You're taking home a huge amount of money. You could at least, have some sort of knowledge of what you're supposed to be doing. So there's another example. And we've had cases like that in the UK. One of the banks that ran into a lot of trouble, the guy who was running it was ex-retailer. He was senior general manager of food stores, the food store group. And he became the managing director of a financial services group. What experience did he have? None. So these things are very important. But again, it's basic, isn't it? When you look at this, you think, oh, Barron's Bank, it's complicated. What on earth is he doing? I don't understand this trading that he's doing. But what we would understand as risk managers is what's going on with this 88888, what's going on with the fact he's in charge of the front office and the back, what's going on with the fact he's now just got a part-time man out of Hong Kong. Anybody spot anything else?
I also spotted the fact that they believed he was making, you spoke earlier about risk and return.
Exactly, return.
They believed that he was making profits while maintaining a low risk. They called it making a low risk profit.
Very good. So everybody say that, like just the second line.
Even without the knowledge, they still felt they could get
so here he is. Listen, was supposed to be exploiting low risk arbitrage opportunities, So if he's exploiting low risk opportunities, even if we don't understand what arbitrage is, doesn't matter. His strategy, as we discussed before, supposedly has a low risk strategy for his business there. So how on earth is he making massive profits? It doesn't make sense. So another tip for you as risk managers, and we used to do this in Barclays when I worked there many years ago, the things we would look for in risk would be things that were bad, because obviously we wanted to try and fix those. But the other thing that we always used to look at is unusual high profits, Because you know as well as I do, making unusually high profits in any type of business is very, very difficult indeed, isn't it? Because we all face lots of competition. So what you need to look for is if someone's reporting very high profits, let's take a look. We're not going to tackle it in an unprofessional way. We're just going to tackle it professionally, talk about, things this person is doing, or we're very interested. You seem to be making very good returns. Can you tell us a little bit about, your trading activities? And if we don't understand it, we've got to find out, haven't we? That's our job. That's our job. If we don't know, maybe one of our colleagues knows, or if it's very complicated, we might need to share it with a few of our colleagues. So, third paragraph. Senior managers at Barings, where did they come from? Primarily merchant banking, yeah? So these were traditional merchant bankers in the City of London, you know, been going about 200 years. What did they know about trading? Absolutely zero, I would expect. Absolutely nothing. They would have no idea, you know, what he was doing. So they knew very little about trading. So even in the face of large profits, which should have tipped them off to the fact that substantial risks were being taken, they continued to believe that Leeson had matched positions on the Singapore exchange and hence was making a low risk profit. It's just nonsense, isn't it? You know, it's just not common sense. The ladies have a lot of common sense. That's why you're good in business, and this is not common sense. So anything else we can spot?
But couldn't they just simply look at their statements to see what their position was? Because I work in risk for a
Yes.
trading company and I check this stuff every day to make sure
Yes, and what do you
our,
look for?
I'm looking to make sure our position is flat, that we have no exposure,
Yes.
market exposure. I'm looking to
Yes.
make sure that we are properly hedged, so we have
Yes.
no exposure to price movements.
Yeah.
I'm looking for, if we have a flat price position, what is our flat price position? How has the market moved?
Yes.
I'm checking our P&L every day to see
Yeah.
what our position is compared to the market.
Yeah.
I just manage all of our risks for our office, and I check all of this stuff every day and report it to head office. So I don't know.
Good.
It's very.
Yeah, so what's happening in this case is they should have had somebody like you, shouldn't they? In Singapore. Yeah. Now, if you'd been doing everything you've just told us, sitting in Singapore, looking at Nick Leeson's activities, this bank would never have gone broke, would they? You know, they might have had a tough time, but you would have alerted the management, the senior management, the directors, to the fact that there's a lot of strange things going on here, yes? Which he was able to cover up. Now, what about the Asset Liability Committee?
They don't say much
So
about what is happening there. They
Yeah.
just set it up, but they don't say what controls were put in place in Singapore as far as
So they're
reporting.
doing a hopeless job as well.
Yeah.
So in January 1995, look, 26th of January, here's the London team. They give a presentation to the ALCO, the Asset Liability Committee, stating Leeson is operating a perfectly matched book. How on earth could they do that? They must have been friends of Leeson, or again, they're totally incompetent. Yeah? So the whole
Now recall what the recall what we said were prepayments. What we said were prepayments, or what actually happens in respect to the tax regime. Remember, every time an individual get paid, let's go from an individual perspective, the individual or a portion of the individual salary is withheld. Remember that? And we said that this is done so because it's at that point when the individual has the means, but in tax term, what do we call it? The wherewithal to pay. Okay? Now, when it comes to companies, even though the filing would the major filing would normally be in, or should I say, in April of each year, companies have to send monies in quarterly. Okay, and so they will be sending an estimated percentage of whatever they think their taxes will eventually be. And so what happens, as you know, no one has a crystal ball, and so no one really gets it to the point. And so there are instances where you would have sent more money, and so when you do your taxes, you determine that your taxes is less, the amounts that you would have sent early would have been, for instance, a prepayment, and therefore you're now entitled to a refund of that prepayment. Remember, we also want to make sure that we send more money to the federal government. Why is that? Because
If you don't send them, you get penalized.
it's a possibility that you can be penalized as a result for sending an amount that is less. And you remember we said 25%? You see what I'm saying? If your, or the amount that you should have paid is 25% or more than 25%, remember there's a tax on that. Okay? And so you want to, in the most instance, send more. The thing with penalties from the IRS is that they are very strict. So you're paying interest on this money also that you should have sent. So imagine the interest are accumulating also, because as far as the federal government is concerned, you should have sent us our money. You didn't send us our money, and so we're going to tax you for not sending us our money. And so what is it? It's a deterrent. Let the individual know we're not playing around. Okay, and so now that brings us, like I said, to the foreign tax credit. And so let's begin there. For those of you who just came, a copy for you. Everyone's just as well.
Mr. Richard,
Yes, sir.
sorry, just stepping back to that last topic about the businesses providing credit to, is that the
Now you said businesses provide
where
credit.
sorry, where the businesses make returns quarterly, where they want to pay more. That is different.
But you don't really want to pay more. But you want to be as
sufficient.
accurate as possible.
Sufficient as possible.
Okay.
The amount that was likely to be done.
Yes.
That is separate from the capital doctrine, right? You mentioned the capital tax, return of capital doctrine, something
The capital doctrine.
where it takes away, I think the overheads, the companies or businesses overheads or something like that.
Well, they're not. Okay. You remember when we first started 3 weeks ago? We talked about 4 AGI deductions, from AGI deductions. Those are expenses that the Congress allows you to reduce your taxes by, because that's what it takes for you to be in business. Okay? You have to pay your BEC, you have to pay your staff, you see what I'm saying? You have to pay your phone, then you have to pay your, for instance, employees' insurance and things of that nature. You have to buy your product, so the materials to buy the product, if you're buying and purchasing the product, or if you're making the product, the material itself. Now, what is the capital doctrine? Remember we said that the capital doctrine is, or states, that an individual must be allowed to recover the amount which the individual has actually vested in, for instance, a particular asset itself. And that will be their basis. Remember, capital will be equal basis or will be equal adjusted basis. You remember I explained the difference between basis and adjusted basis last week when I talked about the house, $300,000, right? And then there's an extension that goes on to the house, okay? That's capital there. The other, where you're going now, it relates to expenses and deductions itself. Happens in two different ways. The capital doctrine, in many instances, of course, you're right to some extent in terms of it being the capital doctrine, but it relates to, in most part, or it can be easily seen when there's a sale of, for instance, an asset. Okay? But in that regard, it can also be related to sale of inventory, which is also an asset. And that inventory will be the cost of goods sold. And so that is, in effect, the capital doctrine working in that regard. You see what I'm saying? The cost of goods sold will reduce, your revenues will be reduced by your cost of goods sold. But of course, not only is it reduced by your cost of goods sold, it is reduced further by other expenses that are considered legal and legitimate. In the tax laws, it says all those are expenses, and I keep this in mind, that are ordinary and necessary. Ordinary with regards to the type of business you're in, and necessary for the continuance of your business, for the success of your business. all those expenses that are ordinary and necessary. Now, you lawyers, of course, you know better than me. The law sometimes can be very broad. The question is, what is ordinary? Or what is necessary? If we are in Alaska, is air conditioning necessary?
But heating.
But heating is necessary. If we are in Texas in the summer, is heating necessary?
No.
But air
But air
conditioning.
conditioning.
You see what I'm saying? So I'm just drawing these references to tell you that ordinary and necessary is not across the board. It depends on the business that you're in. The business that you're in will dictate what is ordinary and what is necessary. Take, for instance, employment. If you have, for instance, a small business say value about $100,000, do you need a chartered accountant on staff paying him $70,000? Right? But if you are a big business, you would need, you see what I'm saying? So what happens is that it's this moving line in terms of what is ordinary and necessary. And so what happens is that the interpretation would need to be had for each individual situation. Okay? But the expenses that are ordinary and necessary, if you're in the grocery business, you're selling grocery. It's ordinary and necessary that you have grocery. Great. If you're selling cars, that's a whole new different issue. Okay? Now, let's take this a little further. You're selling cars. Would you have this big cost as it relates to what do we call it, snacks in the office or something like that for your office staff? Would that expense be large? It shouldn't be. But however, you will be allowed, for instance, to take a deduction for an expense related to, say, supplies for the office, right? But it shouldn't be of any magnitude as in the grocery business. You see what I'm saying? So everything has to be within reason. Okay? Relative, like you said, to the situation at hand.
Alright, so sorry,
Okay?
just want to make sure I get it clear. So then, as per the spreadsheet, would it be safe to say that this return of capital doctrine should be under the exclusions as per the listed item? That, would it be one of the exclusions, or would it have to be put under adjustment for those income?
I guess you can say exclusions, but in the reality, it's really a 4 AGI deduction. See, what happened is that when we say exclusions, now if I give you I gave you the definition of exclusion. I tell you, as I told you, it's those items that the Congress has specifically excluded from taxes. Okay? The capital doctrine, however, comes from a judicial perspective. You see what I'm saying? That law was not necessarily from Congress. It was where they had a case and they had to, where the IRS was saying, okay, you can't include this or you have to include that, and then the court says, no. It's a thing called capital. If I may give you an example of the capital doctrine, if I may. have to put exactly where it is where you get the definition as it relates to that. But so I'll come back and think exactly where it is specifically. Can't remember right now. All right. Okay.
Is that the definition for AGI?
No. But anyway, as I was saying, the courts have told the Congress that these things one should be entitled to take a deduction for, and as a result, it has become tax law. So I can't remember exactly where to give it. I'll think about it some more and try to find where it is specifically. Okay, but yeah, like I said, see what happens is that with law, sometimes you find part of the law in one section and then part of the law in another section, and so one may say, okay, yeah, I qualify for these exclusions. And then one may say, well, not only do I qualify for exclusions when I go to the 4 EGI, here again, I qualify again, okay? Because this is here now, an ordinary and necessary expense, okay? All right, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure we put it on where it fits under this department.
Okay. So 25. And we are. Okay, here we are. So foreign tax credit. It says United States retained the right to tax its citizens. Is everyone there? Okay. Remember why the United States maintained the right to tax its citizens? Remember what we said? It kind of reminds me of in any insurance people in here? Okay. In insurance, somehow, I enter the market, they say claims follow premiums. That sounds about right, right? Wherever you paid your premium, you're going to make your claim. Okay? In the United States has the right to tax its people. Okay? You remember taxation was not officially a part of the United States Constitution. And so when they were taxing the individual, it was found unconstitutional. And so as a result, they had to do what is called the 16th Amendment. Okay? And with regards to the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, that would allow the United States the right to tax the citizenry. Now, the problem was when they taxed them, there was a gentleman in there whose name was Andrew Jackson. Any of you familiar with Andrew Jackson? You see him every day, I hope, right? It's on the $20 bill. Okay?
Some of us might not see that every day like this.
Well, I'm certain all of you have seen the $20 bill. Andrew Jackson is on the $20 bill, and Andrew Jackson, he was president in 1836. 1736. 1736. And apparently he, as a young individual growing up prior to becoming president, he was strictly against taxes. And he was strictly against the bank. What do we call the bank? The central bank, or what they had in the United States. And so what he did is he just outruled all of them. Hey, this ain't Constitution, so he got rid of it. And so as a result, there's one thing that always brings about a cost to the government. countries like the United States. That's war. Okay? And so, in that time of war, back in, when was that? In 1912. You remember it was the coming of the World War I at that point? And so they needed money. And so as a result of them needed money, that's when they decided, hey, you know what, we need to amend the Constitution. And here we have the 16th Amendment to the Constitution that gave them the right to tax individuals. Everyone was, just like in the Bahamas now, everyone was supposed to taxes. Only the corporations were really taxed, and what they did, it was 1% at that point. Now you see the rates these days. The rates are 34%, and that's the problem with taxes. They very rarely go down. And every time the government needs money, they put it up. And so, you know, these are things you have to avoid. But, you know, like I said, in terms of my opinion, when it comes to that, I am really neutral on the subject matter because I know that the government needs to do something. Right? What it needs to do, I really don't know at this point. Each country is different. Now, what the OECD and those want them to do is a whole new different issue again, which Bahamians are not for. But I will say this to you. VAT or income tax.
Are you saying that the OECD wants them to
The tax in general.
okay.
Tax in general, because one of the things the OECD is saying is that you're not a real country. The problem is, it's not really, as you will see later, it's not really that we want you to implement taxes, you know. It's we want you to be like us, so you can feel what we feel when our citizens come in your country and invest and hide money and not pay taxes. That's really what they want. You can really do, and I think they don't want the duty tax. Why? Because it's really not, what should I say? Business friendly. Now, here again in the Bahamas, when I was in college, a professor told me, we were talking, he said, where are you from? And I said, Bahamas. He said, well, you don't have to worry about this. And I said, so why? He said, the Bahamas is not a real country. Literally, he said that the Bahamas is not a real country. Now, at the time, being very juvenile and naive on the subject of economics, I kind of took offense to it, right? But that is reality. The Bahamas is not a real country in terms of how does the Bahamas stand up on the world market when it comes to true economics. For instance, what do we make? What do we sell in terms of products?
Services.
The thing with that is the service stays here. Agree? It doesn't leave here.
Customers come here and they
That's the problem. They gotta come here for it. You can't package it. Send it away. And so how are you really competing? Well, and so you get to understand and appreciate why he would have said that. If you look at the United States, they sell. Japan, the UK, France, you see what I'm saying? All of these countries, they sell something. All of these countries, if they are in recession, the world feels it. If the Bahamas is in recession, does the world feel it? No. I mean, of course, the Caribbean would feel it because Haiti would feel it. Jamaica would feel it. You get the idea? Probably Barbados would feel it. But does the world really feel it? And so that is the situation there. And so we're talking about the 16th Amendment. And so which gives the U.S. the right to tax. And says the United States retains the right to tax its citizens and residents on their world taxable income. This approach can result in double taxation, presenting a potential problem to U.S. persons who work or invest abroad. And so to reduce the possibility of double taxation, Congress enacted the foreign tax, that is the FTC provision. Under this provision, a qualified taxpayer is allowed a tax credit for foreign income taxes paid. The credit is a dollar for dollar reduction of U.S. income what? Tax liability. Remember the formula we looked at just now? So if you've determined your taxes, right? You've determined what it's going to be. And we're not talking about the tax that you will apply your rate to. That's taxable income. You've actually taken the taxable income and multiplied by the rate. And says, okay, my tax is $100,000. Great? And so, now that you're dealing internationally, right? You're paying taxes in 2 places. The Congress now says, you know what, we're going to give you a tax credit, and this will reduce your liability. And notice the words here, dollar for dollar. In other words, if you have a $10,000 credit, you will reduce your liability by $10,000 in its entirety. And so, we have an example here. I love the examples to kind of bring it home. Ace Tools Inc., a U.S. corporation, has a branch operation in Mexico, from which it earns taxable income of $750,000 for the current year. Ace pays income tax of $150,000 on these earnings to the Mexican tax authorities. Ace must also include the $750,000 in gross income for U.S. tax purposes. We're on
24 tax credit.
25, 24. Software, yeah.
That's what you copy of.
Which example is that?
Example 23.
23.
Top of the page says tax in the news. Taxes will be smaller by
25,
25, 24.
Okay. So before considering the FTC, Ace owes $255,000 in U.S. income taxes on this foreign source income. Thus, the total taxes on the $750,000 could equal $405,000, $150,000 from Mexico, and $255,000 for the United States. A 54% effective tax rate. And so the question is now, when we say 54% effective, if you take the 405 and divide it by the 750, or whatever. But Ace takes an FTC of $150,000 against the U.S. tax liabilities on the foreign source income. So Ace total taxes on the $750,000 is now $250,000. $255,000, which is the 150 plus the 105, right? Does everybody understand that? So how do we get the 105? The 255? The key. Remember now, you gotta look at the tax what? Liability, do we agree? And the U.S. tax liability is what? 255. It's the tax liability we're looking at, right? And the tax liability is reduced by the amount of taxes you pay to the foreign authorities. And so we'll have less the foreign tax credit, which is what? In this instance, it's the amount that they've actually paid. Do we agree? And so now this should come to 105. You get it? So the question is, so how much taxes they actually pay? Well, the amount that they will pay to the U.S. is the 105, right? The amount that they will pay to the Mexican is the 150. Do we agree? Which brings us now to what? 255. Okay? Now the 255 looks the same, but they're not the same. Agree? This first 255 is the amount that they have to pay to the U.S. Agree? And the amount they're actually paying to the Mexican is 150, which leaves 105. Remember, the liability is reduced by the credit. The credit is the amount that you've actually paid to the foreign authorities. Okay? So the question is, then it comes back and says, so how much tax have you actually paid? The amount that you paid to the foreign authorities and the amount that you would have to pay to the US. In this case, this is the US and this is the foreign. So we will have, in this case, Mexico and US. Okay, so the FTC is elective for any particular tax year. If the taxpayer does not choose to take the FTC, that is subsection 164, allows a deduction for foreign taxes paid or incurred. Now note in this instance, we said what? Remember, we were here, we have a deduction. Now, you remember that we, at the first day of class, we talked about this. We said we have various things. Remember, do you recall this? You have your for AGI deduction, right? And you have your from AGI deduction. Do we agree? So, we're saying here, if they decide not to take this credit, now how can they decide? Remember, it's elective. You've all been to school, especially the ones who've been to school in the US, and probably the ones who've been to the UK or whatever. You have an elective, which means what? You have choices. Do we agree? And so they decided this is the mode that will go this year. Each year,